Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Global Lessons for Local Struggles Against Open Net Pen Finfish Aquaculture. My name is Richard Howell, and I'll be your moderator. We're excited to have you here for this session, and we have a great lineup of speakers from around the world. Right before we begin, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping notes to help things run smoothly. The first thing to tell you is that it's a Zoom webinar. So you're not visible and you're not audible. Only our speakers and panelists will be on screen and able to speak. We're hoping you'll have some questions. We'll have a Q&A at the end. If you have questions at any time, please use the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your screen. And when you do ask your question, if you can indicate where you live, it'll help our speakers tailor their answers to suit your question. Please type your question in, and we'll do our best to actually answer the questions at the end. We know not everybody's great with Zoom, so we do actually have the chat running. You can message everyone or just the hosts, the presenters. And if you have any technical problems, we do have Rob, our IT guy. He'll be happy to try and help you and support you in the chat. The session is being recorded, and after this meeting, we'll be sharing the recording on social media. So if you have to dive out for some reason or you miss something, you'll have a chance to actually catch up. If you have problems understanding me or hearing, you can use the closed caption button, which again is over here on the bottom of your screen. And that's it for housekeeping. So let's get started. And the first of our international speakers is actually very local. It's Wendy Watson-Smith. Wendy seems to spend a very long time trying to get rid of fish feedlots in the bays of Nova Scotia, and has been doing this since 2012. And Loch Duarte, a Scottish fish feedlot company, applied for leases around this area. There was a community association called for the Preservation of the Eastern Shore, and it was an alliance of people who lived around the area, coastal residents, fishers, tourism people, and other businesses. It was one of the founding organizations which led to Healthy Bays, which is the group which is hosting this webinar. And Healthy Bays came together in 2020 so that we could work with other people facing the same issue with open net pens coming into the area. So with that, I'd like to hand you over to Wendy.
Hi. Oops. I just thought I unmuted myself and somebody else did it for me. Thank you. What I'm going to try and do is just situate ourselves in what has happened in Nova Scotia, probably over about the last 15 years, and bringing us up to our present struggle with trying to keep fish feedlots out of our bays. So over the last 15 years, people all over Nova Scotia coastal communities have organized to oppose this industry. There has been protests, there has been meetings with MPs, there has been petitions, there has been art, there's been working on the regulations, trying to improve them. People have participated in all kinds of different activities to keep this industry out. Unfortunately, each successive government, since I was involved in the beginning in 2012, has continued to promote this industry. And the industry itself definitely uses divisive tactics, which I'm sure many of our other panelists will be able to attest to as well. They divide and conquer to try and get their goal of getting cheap access to our public waters. So, and also the proponents of this industry are the same around the world. Some of the companies that we've dealt with here are Cermaq, which is from Norway. We've dealt with Cook Aquaculture, which is the most prominent proponent in our area, and they're from New Brunswick in Canada. And when I started out, the company Loch Duart was the company from Scotland that attempted to get leases in our area of the province. So also I wanted to let people know that as elsewhere, probably the industry is very heavily subsidized. In 2012, for instance, Cook Aquaculture received $13 million from the federal government. That was in compensation because they had to slaughter salmon in Shelburne Harbor, sorry. And the same year, the government of Nova Scotia gave Cook Aquaculture $25 million for their expansion plans here. So certainly the government has been behind the scenes, definitely promoting this industry. In 2013, however, a moratorium on fish feedlot development was put in place in Nova Scotia, and that was because of the strong vocal opposition from communities everywhere where this industry tried to get in. This moratorium was called also as we were going into a provincial government, and the provincial government realized that it was a real hot button issue. And so that was one of the reasons why they called a moratorium. And at that time, Alexandra Morton, who is one of our presenters later on from British Columbia, was part of our resistance here on the Eastern Shore. She came to talk to people about her experience in British Columbia, Canada, but she also helped us do some citizen science, like buying fish from the corner store to see if they had sea lice, because the government kept telling us that there was no sea lice in Nova Scotia. And so it was great to have her here. But at the same time as well, the companies definitely play hardball. There was what is called a slap suit that Cook Aquaculture initiated against the communities of St. Mary's Bay. And this suit was solely to silence the opposition there. I mean, they have lots of money, and this was a huge threat. Also, someone in our organization on the Eastern Shore was threatened with a lawsuit. So this industry has a lot of money, and they do play hardball. Out of the moratorium came an extensive consultation that took place in 2014, and many people participated, including people in coastal communities. And out of this came, I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but it's called the Dole-Leahy report. And although there was parts of the report that seemed to be good and seemed to acknowledge the participation that coastal communities had, the big thing was that there was no ban on fish feedlots. And so subsequent governments just took bits and pieces of the report, and they certainly didn't take the pieces of the report that acknowledged how important it was for coastal communities and the public to have an input into the consultation on these leases. Social license to this day continues to be ignored in this province. So this moratorium was lifted again. So we were open for business in 2017, and the province was keen on expanding the industry. In 2018, there was a study done, and it was a study about the interaction of lobster landings with fish feedlots, because the fishers in Port Mouton Bay in Nova Scotia had noticed that 2 to 3 years after a fish feedlot being put into their bay, there was definitely a decrease in their landings. This study was done by Inka Molesky, Ron Lukes, and Ruth Smith, and is a peer-reviewed study that is still accessible and definitely shows a correlation between lobster landings and fish feedlots. In 2019, our then Minister of Fisheries and Fishery and Aquaculture visited Tasmania, because he thought if he took some of the fishers to Tasmania, he would be able to reassure them that there was not going to be any problem with the lobster fishers and existing alongside this industry. In that same year, in 2019, Cermaq, a Norwegian company, had been awarded many options to lease in our province. It is important to notice that our province only requires one public meeting. That's it. That's consultation. That's it. So Cermaq chose to hold public meetings in all of the communities where they had lease applications. And they were met with packed halls of angry citizens who opposed their filthy industry. And in the end, Cermaq stated that they could not find any suitable bays in Nova Scotia in which to operate. The bays were too shallow, there was no flushing capability, and I don't think they liked the opposition that they encountered at every meeting that they had. It was at that time that the Healthy Bays Network was formed, because prior to that, each little coastal community was taking on the industry on their own. And so we felt it was really, really important in Nova Scotia to have a provincial organization that assisted, where we could assist each other in taking on these battles. So that brings us to the present period, where we have a conservative government, very, very, they've got a super majority. They're definitely promoting the industry and want it to expand it greatly. And they're definitely not listening to our voices again. In their previous administration, they said they wanted to expand the industry by fourfold. And the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture is going to take a trip to Norway to consult with people there. So on July 4th of this year, the provincial government announced a coastal classification system, and I think this system has been used also in other parts of the world. Supposedly, it's a scientific mapping tool that is used to assess the suitability of a site for aquaculture development. But what we see it as just another promotion of the industry, because basically, when you look at the map that the government presented, almost all of Nova Scotia is open for business. The government prefers to force citizens, fishers, and communities to hire lawyers in order to engage in the really cumbersome aquaculture review board process, and it's heavily biased in favor of the industry. We are now facing license renewals, site expansions, and new site applications in at least 3 sites of the province, and we expect more to come. And there, in our past history, in the last 15 years, there's only been one lease that was rejected, and that lease was rejected because it was close to a wild salmon river. The application in Bayswater is an application for a renewal, so that's of an existing site. And the only way that people can participate in making their voices known in that situation is to write. There's no public meeting, so they have to write about their concerns. This site has been illegally operating since 2018. And the people in the area have seen a black smelly substance on the beach when the feedlot is operational. The province says there's no correlation. We believe there is. Another site at Liverpool, Cook Aquaculture, would like to expand the feedlot there by 5-fold. One of its sites is also close to a beautiful provincial beach. And the lobster fishers in that area are very, very concerned about these lease applications and are part of the interveners who will speak up against this lease application. In St. Mary's Bay, there is a lease application for 4 new sites by a Norwegian company called Canadian Salmon. Part of the approval process of a license in Nova Scotia requires that both the federal and provincial departments give a report. And the federal department it's the scientists that gave this report, because the federal government promotes the industry as much as the provincial government. But the federal scientists have produced a report that talks about the destruction that can happen in this bay if these sites are accepted. It's our most lucrative lobster and scallop fishing area. The lobster industry in Nova Scotia is worth between $1 and $1.5 billion. So these leases are a real threat to this area. They say that in the science report that the effect of the feces, the pesticides and chemicals used in this industry basically will impact the whole bay. So that's part of the reason why we're holding this webinar. We feel that, these are local fights, but they're also international fights. And we wanted to learn from people around the world who've had some successes in what they've done around this industry. And we're hoping to learn from you and work with you in the future, because we think this fight against this industry has to be not only local, but international, and that we have to work together with organizations like ourselves, the Healthy Bays Network, the organizations from other countries who are presenting here today, and the Global Salmon Farming Resistance. So thank you very much, and welcome to all of our panelists. We're so happy that you were able to join us. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy. This gives everybody a good overview of what's going on, and I suspect it's very similar to other parts of the world. And that brings us up to our next speaker, who's just come in from salmon fishing. And it's Rune Jensen, CEO of Salmon Camera. A little bit of background on Rune. He's the co-founder and CEO of Salmon Camera, a Norwegian environmental non-profit dedicated to protecting wild salmon, sea trout, and sea char. Salmon Camera was founded in 2001 and registered in 2011, and raises public awareness about the human-caused threats to wild salmonids and advocates for sustainable practices. Rune leads his work as a volunteer alongside his career as an airline captain and a fishing guide as well, I hear, and is helping to communicate the science in accessible ways and contributing to the public debate to support the recovery of wild fish populations. So welcome to Rune in Norway.
Hello guys, from Norway, and I need a little bit of help to kind of start the presentation. I cannot, do you see it?
Not yet, Rune.
All right, just a second. Just a second. A little bit of patience with an old guy that is not very familiar with. So how did I do that? It's like
share button at the bottom of the screen there in the middle.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Bottom of the screen. Share. Where are you?
So it should pop up on your computer.
Do I need to? Yeah. There you go. I'm sorry, I was on the wrong page here. So there you go. So a little bit of technical problems. I'm sharing now. Is it something visible now? Maybe. Let's see. There you go.
Not yet. Oh, here we go.
There we go. All right. I'll try to.
There we go. So if you go into presentation mode, we're good.
Okay. Okay. Is it presentation mode right now?
Yep. Then you can talk over.
Cool. So when it comes to salmon farming, that's kind of the things we have been looking into. But this is a general concern when it comes to all open net pen fish farming. So in order to kind of get a good view of the facts here, we need to look at the bigger picture. And when size matters, and by the way, I have the source information where you can find it yourself in top of the slides. So just to give an impression of the salmon farms, what that really is. In Norway, and all the figures now are talking about Norway. We have like 1,000 salmon farms, actually 1,100 when they count all the different permits. And a salmon farm is 4 to 12 open net pens, where approximately 75% of them will be in operation at any given time. In the meantime, the ones that are not in operation will be followed for a short time, maybe 3 months. And the average Norwegian salmon farm will be 3,600 tons of biomass, what they call the individual salmon here in Norway. That's biomass. It's not animals, not fish, it's biomass. So 3,600 tons. And the gross production in Norway, we produce approximately 1.6 million tons of salmon with an estimated value of $8 billion a year. And the thing that you really should pay attention to is this number, because producing 1.6 billion tons of salmon a year, it only takes 8,200 full-time equivalents when it comes to work. So they have more employees than 8,200, but that's how many full-time equivalents that represent to produce 1,600,000 tons in Norway. And that is 6,820 in the salmon farms alone, and then an estimate of 1,380 from the slaughterhouses. So a total of 8,200. And the reason why that number is a little bit important for you guys is that when somebody come and try to charm your politicians to kind of accept salmon farms, this is how many jobs it's created. In Norway, we have about 200 tons of farm salmon per FTE. Let's call it just employees. I know it's more employees than the number of FTEs, but anyway, that's 100% positions. That's an FTE. That means that each FTE is producing 996,000, close to $1 million per year to their owners. And but the question here now is the open net pen salmon farming only a problem for wild salmon? And the reason why we started was to kind of protect our wild salmon. But when we start to look closer into this matter, it becomes clear to us that it's a lot more to be concerned about than the salmon, but more about this later. So what we have to look at is the ecological cost of these 8,200 employees in Norway as a total. Because the ecological cost depends on the amount of organical, biological, and chemical pollution. You cannot look only on the biological or only at the chemical or only at the organic. You have to look at all three of them combined. So the question really is, these pollutions are they out of sight, and are they also out of mind? So a little bit short about this. This is stuff that most of you probably know already. Sea lice, that is part of the biological pollution, and it causes a lot of mortality of the outmigrating juveniles. The Institute of Marine Research in Norway has estimated on the top level that it would kill 90% of the outmigrating smolt. More recent numbers indicate it's more like 35 to 55% of all the outmigrating juveniles that is being killed because of sea lice during their migration. And then, of course, there's escaped farm fish, which decreases genetic integrity and decreases survival of wild salmon and fry in the rivers, and also spreading disease. Then we have the big unknown when it comes to biological pollution, that's the viruses. There has been published quite a few reports on viruses. Alexandra Morton has done a great job on this, and we have done a great job on this also. We're just waiting for the kind of final report from it, because we did a research over 11 years, sampling close to 30,000 salmon, or tissue from 30,000 salmon caught in Norway, in the sea and in the rivers. So this is what a heavy sea lice attack will cause with both farm salmon and in the end also wild salmon. Well, of course, a wild salmon that looks like this with a head skull open won't live for very long. This is pictures taken from a net pen where you see the same kind of damages. This is a sea trout. You can see the sea lice around his eye and also attached around his body. And the thing here in Norway now, the new science indicates that 0.3 sea lice per gram of fish is the mortal limit. This fish has 12 sea lice on the left side of his head alone. And those you can see in the top of the pictures are, can you see the arrow actually? The arrow, where I'm pointing? No. Well, you can see some newly attached sea lice and also some mobile sea lice. And of course, this kind of put a lot of puncture wounds in the fish, and they get very weakened, and they get taken by predators, or they die simply. And of course, the biological pollution from escaped farm fish. We see desperate fishermen in the rivers that's trying to remove the escaped farm fish from the rivers, which is kind of polluting, not kind of, it is polluting our rivers and causing genetic drift of the local genes for the wild salmon. So all these are escaped farm salmon being caught in the rivers from volunteers. When it comes to the biological pollution, when it comes to viruses, we have quite a good knowledge about Gyrodactylus salaris, which was a parasite introduced to Norway by the salmon farm industry by importing salmon fry for the net pens from Sweden. But a lot of these combinations of diseases is not yet really looked into by science. But the thing is, this is Norwegian names. The English name here is ISA. We know something about it, but very little what in terms of what harm it causes. But we did the research here now. We measured 30,000 salmon, about half caught in the sea in nets or bag nets, and then we compared the prevalence of diseases or viruses with the fish caught in the rivers. So if you see in the Trondheimsfjord on the left side, it says Agdenes, the first blue column. We found a prevalence of ISA as an example. We also have PRV prevalences that are much higher, but 22.6% of the salmon caught in the sea had these viruses, while we only found 0 or 3% in the rivers adjacent to the Trondheimsfjord and then Agdenes. So the light blue colored are the rivers, and the dark blue colors are the ocean or the fjords. And if you go into the middle of the picture, you'll see that Namsfjorden had a prevalence of 11.7% of the adult returning salmon did have this virus, ISA, while only 4.4% had it in the river of Namsen. And then you can see the famous river Alta, the best river in the world, actually, and we have 28% prevalence of ISA in the river. No, I'm sorry, in the sea, but only 3.3% in the river. And you see to the more extreme, we had 41.9% in one fjord, where the adjacent river only had, I can't see what it says there, I think it's 3%. So this clearly indicates that there's something that is filtering out that is the infected fish while migrating from the ocean to the river. So in short terms, these salmon that are affected with ISA, and we can show even worse figures when it comes to PRV. So it's filtering out infected fish. But of course, the wild salmon are kind of our major concern in the beginning. Then comes all the other concerns that come along as we start to dig deeper and see what the salmon farms are doing. And listen, this is also about cod farming or tuna farming or whatever farming that is using open net pen technology. And the organic pollution comes from feed spill, feces from the fish, and you have to remember an average size salmon farm is 3,600 tons. That's like 3,600,000 kilos. So what if we compare that biomass with when it comes to other living creatures? And we don't think it's correct to compare them with 45,000 adult humans, but 45,000 adult humans will be the same biomass as 3,600 tons of fish in a net pen. We find it more interesting to compare it with cows. So imagine every Norwegian average size salmon farm is the same as 6,000 adult cows shitting on the same place in the ocean. And remember, we have 11,000 farms in Norway. I know it's going to be a lot of numbers now, but hey, listen, I'm going to get to a conclusion in the end. So if you multiply 6,000 adult cows with 11 or 1,000 fish farms in Norway, you get an extreme number. And actually, we have to ask ourselves the question, what long-term consequences will this have for the coastal ecology? Here you see the link that will kind of prove what I'm saying is correct. And here's a chart that shows the pollution of phosphor compared to other sources of phosphor. You see we have industry, we have farmland, and we have people, and they are the lower lines. And then on the top, you see the phosphorus from the salmon farms. So this is the total emissions of phosphorus in Norway. And you can see clearly where most of it is coming from. Actually, more than 80% or 85% of it is coming from salmon farming or fish farming. But then that brings us to the next theme that is really concerning. And I have to tell you the truth, I'm losing night sleep over this issue, and that's chemical pollution. When we say that it's 400 tons per year of microplastic being emitted to the sea, that is a very, very low number compared to the reality. The way we measure this is that the feed lines that runs from the pellets, which they blow out in the net pens to feed the salmon, are wearing on the inside of the plastic pipes. And through some Icelandic friends, we were able to measure the weight difference on a new pipe compared to a worn-out pipe that has to be changed every 18 months. And when we add it up and we see that how many kilometers of pipeline has been used per farm, 3,600 actually, we see that the total emission of microplastic is 400 tons per year. And that's fine grind, really microplastic or nanoplastic actually. But 400 tons, how do we relate to that number? It's much better to say, well, 400 kilos per farm. Well, that's easy math. It's 400 per year. It's 1,000 fish farms, 400 kilos per farm. But how much microplastic is being polluting the ocean if we break it down to the FTE per employee? That's 49 kilos per man-year, per person in the industry that is working 100% positions. Then we can look in copper, even worse. 1,700 tons of copper is being emitted to the Norwegian coast every year. And the reason why they use copper is that they want to keep the net pens clean from sea organisms from growing on the nets, clogging the flow of oxygen-rich water into the fish. So they are coating these pens with copper. They used to coat it with copper. And that means that every farm will have at least, it's not an exact number, it's a minimum number, at least a usage of 1,700 kilos of copper per year. And still that is too high number to understand for people what's really going on. So we have to divide it. How many kilos of copper is being emitted by per person employed by the industry here in Norway? Sorry. And you can see it's 207 kilos of copper being emitted by every workplace made by salmon farm industry. 207 kilos. That's the cost of the chemical pollution when it comes to copper. Here in Norway, we have a limit that an industry can emit maximum 2 kilos of copper per year without having a special permit to do so. If I let out 2 kilos of copper per year, more than that, I'll be arrested. But here, every person in the industry is emitting 207 kilos of copper. Then you have the sea lice agents used to get rid of the sea lice. Like in 2015, the industry in Norway, they let out 43,000 tons of hydrogen peroxide per year to get rid of sea lice. 43,000 tons. Nobody knows that. How much is it? But it's like 4,700 kilos per employee is being emitted into the ocean. So when somebody talk about the importance of creating jobs in rural districts, remember these numbers. This is the ecological cost of it. Then we have like diflubencerone and ceflubencerone, and they're so poisonous that if I take 18 grams of this substance and put it into an Olympic-sized swimming pool, that will pollute the swimming pool, the Olympic-sized swimming pool, to 100% mortality for all living crustaceans inside that swimming pool. An average farm in Norway will use 126 kilos of that substance for doing one sea lice treatment. Then we have something called the combination method, that is where you have unsanctioned use of different substances together, like the cocktail effect, that salmon farms, of course, have discovered has a huge effect on the sea lice. Imagine the effect it has on other living sea creatures. And here's the source for this on the lower line. Let's look at the total amount of sea lice agents in the period 2011 to 2020 in Norway, and pay especially attention to the decrease in sea lice agents. And the reason why you see the decrease is that they have started to hot water hose, brush, or freshwater bathe the salmon. And it's actually torture for the salmon. So instead of emitting as much as they did, they're now very proud of not emitting as much, but they're kind of torturing their animals, which they keep in captivity. So here we see the numbers for 2015, which was an especially bad year in the center column, 43,000 tons of hydrogen peroxide, while the rest of the numbers are in kilos. Then comes the thing that I really are afraid of, and that's biocides. That's a coating like the copper used to be. And we think this is nothing less than a disaster for the coastal ecology. Forget the salmon for now. That is actually the least of our problems. 17,000 copper per year. What kind of effect does it have for the survival of non-target organisms? Then they are transitioning.
To wrap up because you're getting.
Yep. I'm just about coming in for landing.
Great.
Then we are transitioning into new biocides like traloperil that is estimated at 2,000 times more toxic than copper. Even though they used 1/4 of the amount in kilos, it's 2,000 more toxic than copper is. And of course, zinc pyrithione and other substances that we really do not know about. And it's important to know that the organic pollution, while the organic pollution increases the production of phytoplankton, the chemical pollution reduces the zooplankton by design. That's what they are used for. So you're creating a disequilibria where you kind of have an elevated phytoplankton production and a reduced zooplankton production. And the thing is, no science or little science has been done to understand the consequences for the low trophic survival after exposure for biocides. And then the final question will be, how can this be legal? Salmon farming destroys wild salmon stocks and sea trout and Arctic char, huge organic pollutions, killing non-target organisms on a large scale. How can that be legal? And then we haven't even mentioned the input factors. So here in Norway, here's the next to the last slide. The Norwegian Constitution, Article 112, states clearly that the citizens of Norway has the right to have a clean and natural environment whose productivity and diversity are maintained, and that natural resources shall be managed on the basis of comprehensive long-term considerations, which safeguard this right for future generations. That is why we are in the process of suing the Norwegian government right now. We are trying to get the funds to do this, and you can read more about it here, if you please. Thank you.
Tusen takk. Appreciate it. Really very good in-depth presentation. Let's move on now to our next speaker, who is Catalina Cendoya, who's the director of the Global Salmon Farming Resistance, a group that we work very closely with. She's from Nechoya, is that correct? It's a coastal city in Argentina, and she has a degree in political science from the University of Buenos Aires. After several years working in government, with the pandemic, she returned to her hometown and a shift in focus towards sustainability and protecting the ocean. Today, she directs the Global Salmon Farming Resistance from the Argentinian NGO Por el Mar, or For the Sea, as the English speakers would say. She's passionate about building a better future for our oceans, and one that is fair, sustainable, and deeply rooted in our local communities. So over to you, Catalina. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Richard. Gracias, and thank you for having me here. I'm going to share a presentation with you. Let me know, please, if you can see it.
Yes, I can see it. It's great.
Perfect. Thank you. So what I'd like to share with you tonight is basically how we managed to prohibit open net salmon farming in Tierra del Fuego in Argentina, and how this global alliance started and how we started building the resistance. Oh, sorry, I can't move the slide. Oh, there. So our wake-up call was in 2018 when our government signed an agreement with the Norwegian government to install farms in one of our most pristine and remote areas here in Tierra del Fuego. And we didn't know much about this industry at the time. We don't have salmon farms anywhere in Argentina, but something that really caught our attention was that the government was talking about the places where the farms were going to be installed as slaughtering points. So we thought this cannot be good. And if we are talking about an intensive type of farming, we need to get informed, we need to know more, and we need to do something about it. So what we did was a really solid campaign that lasted over 3 years, trying not to lose the momentum in any of the years or months, and keeping the subject in the mouth of the people so that we could understand what was going on and make the community understand what would happen if this industry were to be installed. So the first thing we did was a survey. We needed to understand if people knew something about salmon, and we quickly realized that they didn't. They actually thought we caught salmon in our rivers, and we don't even have salmon as a native species. So we decided that our best allies to start talking to people and to convince them were the chefs. So we got together with many of our main well-known chefs in Argentina, Francis Malman, Narda Lepes, and we asked them to take salmon out of their menu and to speak out about it. And they did, and they got the attention of a lot of people. So with the attention of the people, we realized that we needed to give an economic argument to this discussion, because in Argentina at that time, 60% of the people was under the line of poverty. So if we stuck with the environmental argument, we were going to lose this fight, and we needed to prove that economically it wasn't viable. So we contrasted two industries. The Norwegian company Promise, which was 75 jobs plus town development, but actually only 48 of those jobs were going to be covered in the region. The rest were going to be covered by Norwegian people. And we contrasted it with the tourism sector that provided 16,500 jobs that we wanted to preserve and that we know that couldn't coexist because mainly our most touristic places are in our most pristine places, which were the ones that were going to have the farms. So after that economical study, people were really talking about this and discussing it, and we also did a documentary showing how the biodiversity in Chile was dying and the biodiversity that we had. So it had a really emotional aspect for the people to connect, because we were actually asking them, are you willing to turn all our ecosystem and our biodiversity into this dead zone. The documentary was a huge hit, and it was declared of provincial cultural interest. So it was a huge success. And many legislators started paying attention to this because people started claiming that they didn't want this industry. So last but not least, we received a lot of international support because we needed experts on this, and we weren't the experts at the time. So we had help from people from Chile, Norway, Scotland, Canada, and mainly the result was that the legislature of Tierra del Fuego unanimously prohibited open-net salmon farming in the waters of Tierra del Fuego. So after this huge success, we were really motivated, and something that we realized was how strong we could be together. We needed the local community to understand what was going on, but we also needed all the international support that we had. So with different people that we had been talking with and that had helped us, we decided to keep this movement, and that's how the GSFR was born, which is the Global Salmon Farming Resistance, and it's a worldwide community of NGOs, activists, scientists, and we all work in collaboration with one vision, which is to free the oceans from open-net salmon farms, meaning not only to remove the ones that are existing already, but also to hold the expansion to new places. So we are now more than 100 members from 19 different countries with a lot of different backgrounds, like scientific backgrounds, filmmakers, activists, politicians. So we have a lot of input to give to this alliance. And something that we really like to say is that we are not drinking tea. We are not that kind of alliance that just discusses a subject continuously without action. We actually are an action-driven global alliance, and we look for real impact. We know that going towards the banning of salmon farming can be frustrating and can be a really long-term result. But I can show you some of the achievements that we've been having, not only by banning open-net salmon farming, but with other stuff as well, like raising awareness among people. So as I already said, in Tierra del Fuego, we managed to prohibit it in 2021. Then we helped our members from Malvinas Islands in 2022, and it was also prohibited there. Then we worked together with 2 of our members in British Columbia to push to the transition to land-based. Sadly, it was postponed for 2029, but at that time we thought it was a huge success. Then in Maine, we are working at a more local level with some of our members there, and we managed to pass 4 ordinances against industrial aquaculture, and we are trying to go for 6 more. And our latest success was Washington State in January this year. When I talk about we and our success, I mean the success of our members and the other members and ourselves that helped them through those campaigns. But we also had, throughout these 3 years, other successes regarding a lot of articles. We managed to put this subject into the agenda of some international outlets, which was really hard. We also promoted the Off the Table campaign that many of you already know about, that started in the UK, but now it's also active in Australia, in Iceland, in Canada, and we're about to launch it in the US. We cooperated with our members in Iceland, and now 65% of the Icelanders want to get rid of this industry. We helped some of our members and even wrote chapters for some reports. Well, I guess Peter is going to tell you more about this later, but also in Tasmania, we supported the campaigns of our members there, mainly Neighbours of fish farming, and now we can say that 72% of the people there are against this industry. We are trying to raise awareness and are putting some videos talking about different areas in Times Square, and we try to create different and creative assets for our members to use and to communicate this to the public in different and creative ways, because we know it can be hard for people to digest. So basically what we learned and what we think that was successful in this alliance and by building this resistance was that people were fighting this industry all around the world, but they were isolated, or they were connected, but not as much as they are now. And now we can proudly say that they know that they've got a really huge network and partners to work with. They know that if their weakness is in legal issues or in political advocacy, they know who to reach out to. And if they don't, they know they can reach out to us, and we will connect them with the people that we think they need to talk with. Something that we also learned was that sometimes it feels like you're in a merry-go-round, because it can be really frustrating. As a matter of fact, we are now fighting again in Tierra del Fuego and in Malvinas to keep our laws that prohibit salmon farming. So we know that it can be tiring, and we know that sometimes this industry is really powerful, really huge and massive, and they've got these really great communications and marketing campaigns telling the general public and people that salmon is healthy and that salmon is sustainable. So we tried to keep up to their marketing and to give some global messages through global campaigns, and we realized that that was impossible, that we are never going to have the power, the resources that they have. So the competition was really, really hard. But we realized that then the way to do it is with local struggles, with local people, the local communities that actually can turn the tide, at least at a local level. So if I had to tell you something to go with after this presentation, is that although it can be frustrating, and I know that you are going through a lot in Nova Scotia, try to find ways, or to find the people among this alliance that can help you to get creative. If it's an economical study that you need to do because you need to prove that there are other alternatives that are better than salmon farming and that you are missing them because of the farms, or contrasting it to the tourism sector like we did, or to the lobster and artisanal sector, or maybe the way is to show people and to shake them with all the disasters that can be there. And well, you can reach out to us anytime that you like, and we can help you, and we can try to create campaigns that are like really creative and try to win this. And I like to finish my presentation with a quote that I love from Kathy Collins and Doug Franz, who I think all of you know, which is that resistance movements are generated by people who refuse to accept the world as they find it, and who are willing to take personal risk to make it better. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. It's a very lovely presentation, and that's a superb thought to leave on there. And we all know what it's like: one step forward, two steps back, but you know, we keep on pushing. Yeah. Right, we're going to stay with the Southern Hemisphere now, and Catalina alluded to the fact that things have been very interesting in Tasmania these days. And from Tasmania, we have Peter George, who's the president of the Neighbours of Fish Farming. He's should be congratulated because he's recently been. So, what are you running into as a fisheries minister, Peter? Well, what have you been?
I have just been elected as of yesterday officially as an independent member of Parliament, but I based my campaign on a number of issues, including the salmon farms of Tasmania.
Excellent, sir. Give people a quick background to you whilst you get your slides lined up. He's a veteran. I'd say veteran. It's very rude. He's only 73. As an international correspondent, author, community advocate, reported through in over 100 countries through his journalism career. 14 years ago, after sailing the Pacific, he settled in Tasmania, where he helped co-found Neighbours of fish farming in response to the growing concerns about the salmon industry's impacts. As president of Neighbours of Fish Farming, Peter's helped drive awareness of environmental harm caused by the industrial agriculture. He's recently elected to Tasmanian State Parliament with the third highest vote in the state. So he's going to be standing in there, mixing it with them and fighting the good fight. So if you got your slides ready, Peter, over to you.
I'm glad to say that Rob has got the slides ready. So if you'd like to stand by, Rob, thank you very much. I have very little technical competence. May I say welcome to you from Palawa country, the First Nations people of Lutruwita, Tasmania. And we like to acknowledge their leaders, past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm going to talk to you about Neighbours of Fish Farming, which is a community group which started off in southern Tasmania as a reaction to the growing threat of open net fish farms in our area. And I will talk about our organisation. However, there are quite a number of organisations, including the Bob Brown Foundation, Environment Tasmania, and a lot of community groups that have come together. It just so happens that I helped to co-found Neighbours of Fish Farming. And I'd like to acknowledge also the international help we've had from Global Salmon Farming Resistance, which has been a major help to us down here, particularly in raising funds, but also making us feel that we're not alone in our battle. Because a lot of our, I realize after listening to Wendy, a lot of our experiences are very similar to Healthy Bays Network. I will sort of rather do a bit of a romp through, if I may, and answer questions afterwards. Tasmania produces about 60 to 80,000 tonnes of Atlantic salmon, despite the fact that we're in the southern hemisphere and there is no native salmon at all down here. And despite the fact that warming waters are making it increasingly difficult, 4 times faster than anywhere else in the world, to produce those salmon. It creates around about 1,700 or 1,800 jobs, mostly in regional areas, which is a little bit more than 1% of the workforce. Its profits are said to be around about the $1.6 billion, but the multinational fish farms, JBS, the very corrupted Brazilian multinational, Cook Aquaculture, and one other smaller one, pay no tax or very little tax despite their $1.6 billion businesses. Jobs are the political backbone of the salmon industry here. The claims of 5,000 jobs are not just exaggerated, but they're an outright lie. But that's what the producers use to make sure that they keep our politicians on both sides of the House, Conservative and Progressive, in line. 72% of Tasmanians have been shown to want to get this industry out of our shallow coastal waterways and rivers, but that is something which neither of our major parties in Tasmania or in Australia are prepared to support. As I said, waters are warming at 4 times the global average. The result is the increasing use of antibiotics, increasing mortalities, infestations of salps, jellyfish, algal blooms, disease. Rickettsia this summer killed about 1 million fish. And the reaction of the fish farming companies, as I said, the multinationals, is simply to use antibiotics in larger quantities more rapidly and more earlier. So there you are. That's the background of it. This industry started off in the remote Macquarie Harbour over on the west coast of Tasmania, and most Tasmanians were very proud of it. It was small, it was boutique, it sold to the high end of the market, at a very good price. But as it got taken over by publicly listed companies and eventually by multinationals, it's now become the, as we call it, the battery hen of the sea. It's cheap and it's sold in massive quantities on the mainland. Okay, can you have the second slide, please? Neighbours of Fish Farming was established as a community organization. And as you can see, it was a very basic organization indeed. We called ourselves Neighbours of Fish Farming because we thought we could be good neighbours. And it took us quite a few years, took me quite a few years once I became president, to realize that instead of being good neighbours, we needed to be the neighbours from hell. And that's what we worked towards doing. We started building files, we started working with scientists, we started putting together information, and we started to try and get some traction within the media. That was very hard indeed, because the media and the politicians basically saw us as being job destroying troublemakers, small communities not worthwhile talking to. For 10 years, I tried to get the Minister for Fisheries and our local federal MP to come down to and meet with our communities. And over 10 years, probably issued somewhere around 4 or 5 invitations a year. We were never visited by any senior politician in either state or federal government. That all changed with the next slide, please, when Richard Flanagan wrote a book called Toxic, the rotting underbelly of the Tasmanian salmon industry. Richard Flanagan is a Booker Prize winner. He's a world famous author. He's also a journalist, published all around the world. And the industry didn't realize that this was unlike our normal media attempts to get some sort of traction. This is a book that was so well researched that in the years since it was published in 2021, the industry has not been able to find one flaw or one mistake in it. So that allowed, that stimulated the growth of what is, I think, is Healthy Bay's network equivalent, which was, next slide, please, the establishment of the Tasmanian Alliance for Marine Protection, which had been established before that timing, but this is actually when it began to grow. What you see on the bottom right hand, the very long-haired, tall gentleman there in the check shirt, he is a fisherman from the north coast of Tasmania who has just been re-elected along with in Parliament with very much an anti-salmon campaign. So it's an indication that there is a growing independent movement getting into Parliament that is prepared to take on the multinational salmon farmers and their political backers. Next slide, please. We have worked very hard to produce, thank you, to drive our campaign in public. This is where we really began to get media traction, and that has proved to be the most important thing, because it has actually led to even our local Minister for Primary Industries admitting and accepting the fact that the multinational salmon farms have lost their social license. And it is clear, as I said, from the 72% of people in Tasmania who want them out of our shallow waters, that the fish farms are now operating without social license. Can I have the next slide, please? I'll keep going till it comes up. So this is where we began our, can you get it? Yeah, thank you. This is where we've worked with all these other organizations across the state. And so long as each of these organizations have one person, at least one person who's a core person, who's constantly driving the campaign forward, then momentum is constantly established. The next slide, please. So this is what happened with us, with Neighbours of Fish Farming. We decided that we would become a much more galvanized, much more well organized organizations. So the person you see in the middle there is Jess Coughlin, who has become a preeminent campaigner who we now pay to run global salmon farming resistance, and local philanthropists have allowed us for the past few years to keep Jess working with us all the time and driving us forward. And that seems to me to be an absolute core to what has proved to be a very successful campaign, which has gone from being community to federal to national. Next slide, please. So as we improved our campaigning, we started to get right in your face. We went from being the neighbors, the nice neighbors from next door with a little bit of community angst, to being a national organization. What you see here is a billboard campaign that we ran across all the major eastern states. That's a billboard in Sydney. Next slide, please. This was driven because we have on this is Melbourne, this is the Central Railway Station there on the right. We have on our committee, we built a committee with special expertise. In this case, we have people with good environmental credentials, people with legal credentials, people with scientific credentials, and in this particular case, we have a retired advertising executive with very deep understanding of what cuts through and the ability to negotiate good prices for national campaigns like this. So that was Eating Salmon, Killing Tasmania. This has been a real driving force. It's used throughout Tasmania, and you'll see these signs very often on stickers around the country now. Next slide, please. We also took legislative action. This is Jess Coughlin, our campaigner, sitting in the Senate during a greenwashing campaign where we took it to the supermarkets that claim that what they're selling is sustainable salmon, which is clearly not sustainable, where we have been able to attack both the international accreditation agencies and the fish farms through the legislative process of Senate and parliamentary inquiries. This means that we're able to get national attention of the political ends of newspapers and the media. And that's another arm of what is proving to be an increasingly successful arm of our campaign. We're also adopting somewhat more sort of ambushes. Next slide, please. Based on the toxic book and our toxic campaign. So around supermarkets, outside offices of headquarters and so on, and actually on packets of, I don't know whether you can see it there, but on packets of fish, packets of salmon, you can see we use small toxic figures, stickers, and we also use, as you can see on the top right, on the left-hand picture, top right, an illustration of a Morgian skate, which is a 60 million year old animal living in the remote west coast Macquarie Harbour, which has been driven very close to extinction by the toxic waste of the salmon farms. So these are sort of more guerrilla tactics that we've adopted. Next slide, please. The Morgian skate as I said, is a rare animal found only on the west coast in Macquarie Harbour, being driven to the edge of extinction. And this is wherever we can, we use these sort of tools where we can find the well illustrated impacts of the salmon farms to promote the cause of getting open net farms out of our waterways. Next slide, please. Off the table is the national campaign that we have been running, copying the UK, and this is just to illustrate to you that the last 12 or 14 years of Neighbours of Fish Farming and our allies has driven this the industry from being protected and guarded and ignored by politicians onto the front pages not only in Tasmania, but around Australia. It means that our message has been expanded considerably in the amount of time that we've been working, which is now where we are aiming. We're aiming at the consumer. If we can undermine the consumer base of salmon farming, then we will have this won. Next slide, please. I'll be very quick now. I've just gone over my 12 minutes. My apologies. Just to let you know that over summer, there was a mass salmon die-off. Million salmon died as a result of the Rickettsia virus. And this caused much distress around coastlines because salmon flesh was washing up on the beach, salmon fat was washing up on the beach, covering our beaches, which stimulated my run on as a candidate in the federal election in March this year, in which I stood against the federal fisheries minister and the local member who's had that seat locked up for the Labour Party for 18 years. And we ran such a campaign based on salmon farming that we won 42% of the two-candidate preferred vote, which was probably around about 40% more than I expected or anyone else expected. The result has been that we have run the motivation and the momentum of that campaign into a state election. Next slide, last slide, please. Which resulted in the astonishing fact that I won the third largest vote in Tasmania based on a campaign which was very much primarily aimed at the salmon farms and aimed at an electorate which has got a very large coastline with the most beautiful waterways and rivers. That means that as of yesterday, I am the newest and oldest member of the Tasmanian Parliament. And I've committed to 4 years of fighting to get the open net fish farms out of our waterways. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I ran over time.
Thank you so much, Peter. And, you know, I think all of us here sort of hope for that you are very successful in your new position, because I think it's a first for somebody to actually get into a government to try and overcome some of the government shenanigans, which cause us the problems. So thank you again. I'd like to introduce our final speaker, moving back to Canada, but the other side of Canada. Alexandra Morton, who's the director and founder of Raincoast Research. Alexandra is a renowned biologist and is director of the Pacific Coast Wild Salmon Society. Since the 1980s, she has led pioneering research in the impacts of salmon farms on whales and wild salmon in British Columbia. Her work has revealed epidemic levels of parasites and viral diseases in wild salmon linked to open net pens and helped document the displacement of orcas from critical habitat. She's also founded several research and advocacy organizations, produced award-winning media, successfully challenged federal aquaculture policy in court. She's a leading voice for wild salmon protection and ecosystem health on Canada's Pacific coast. Welcome, Alexandra. It's over to you.
Thanks very much. Boy, Peter, I'm going to be interested to see what happens with you, because you're doing something that hasn't been tried, but you're at the level that this all has to be at. Because, you know, one thing we found here is that the federal government, DFO, is the aquaculture industry. The aquaculture portion of DFO and industry are one thing. So there's no reporting, there's no lawsuits, there's no anything you can do to fight that. And that's one thing we found out. For you guys on the East Coast, one question that I just think really needs to be resolved is, I took the industry and the federal government and the province of BC to court, because it's actually unlawful in Canada for the province to be regulating salmon farms because they're in a federal jurisdiction. And as soon as I filed that lawsuit and the court accepted it, they could not grant another license. They couldn't grant another lease. It brought everything to a halt for a moment. And so I really don't understand, it's this one country, how it is being provincially regulated still on the East Coast when we proved in court that this is unlawful, it's against the law. But that aside, the science didn't work. I mean, it built the understanding within people who need and love wild salmon that this industry was bad, but it didn't work. And neither did the media, neither did the lawsuits, neither did the 20 or so reviews that were done by the government that we all slaved over, going through thousands of documents and writing reports. And, you know, all of you have spoken about the damage of this industry. It is so dirty. It is so damaging. But in 2017, a bunch of us occupied some farms for 280 days in the winter. And that was the turning point, because the people on the farms were able to shoot video inside the farms. People saw what was actually going on. Now, my colleague and friend from years ago, Don Staniford, is trying this in Scotland. So we know that's not quite enough. The horrifying images aren't quite enough. But what we also had in British Columbia here was the First Nations, for whom salmon are, using the word important is not really correct. It's vital. And we've all gotten so used to wild salmon going down every single year. It's just kind of like a fact of life, and people just expect them to get worse every single year. But suddenly they were at the bottom, and I think they were desperate. The occupation occurred, and now the chiefs had to do something because they're afraid somebody was going to get hurt at some point. And the companies were filing injunctions against us, and the whole thing was escalating. And so they stepped in and got into negotiations with government. And it took an entire year. And they weren't allowed to tell us what they were doing inside. And I was so worried that they were going to cave in, but they didn't. And so 3 First Nations got the right to get rid of farms in their territory. And they did it in an incredibly skillful way. They said, okay, we're just going to take a few of you out at a time, and then a few more. But the last 7 farms, we're going to make a decision in 3 years. But in those 3 years, we're going to get on your farms and we're going to do whatever research we want with you. But we're in control, and we're going to do the research, and we're going to keep your sea lice down, and we're going to count your sea lice. And that is what happened. And there is research coming out now that isn't quite out, that will be very revealing. But what happened was those chiefs knew. They weren't going on the word of anybody. They knew what was going on in the farms. They knew what they were able to control and what they weren't able to control. And at the end of the day, they got rid of those farms. And then our Minister of Fisheries, Bernadette Jordan, December of 2020, I still to this day don't know how she did it or why she did it, but she canceled another 17 licenses for Cermak, Grieg, and Maui. We just have Norwegians here basically operating. And today, the reason I've been so distracted through this webinar is, again, this year, we're seeing extraordinary salmon returns to only the areas where the farms were removed. So in the West Coast, we have 5 different species of salmon. Some come back the next year after they go out. So they're 2-year fish. That's the pink salmon. And then we have coho that are 3 years, and sockeye are 4, and chinook can be up to 7. And so sequentially, we've been seeing incredible returns. Like the pink salmon in the Hatta River, which was right beside a Maui salmon farm. And I counted lice on the young fish coming out of that river for decades. In fact, this is the first year since 2001 that I have not looked at a single louse. I'm quitting, but counting the lice. That river, as soon as the little fish weren't going by a farm, the number of fish compared to the parents increased tenfold. It went from about 1,000 to about 10,000. And then last year was the first return of what we call the 4-year-old chum salmon. And this was going to be the first run of these big salmon. They're also called the dog salmon. They get these big teeth and stripes. And they just blew people's socks off. They were 12 times higher. There was this one river that averaged over the last 10 years or so of like 4,500 fish. 52,000 came back. And everybody's like, oh, they must be straying from another river. But this was happening in the next river and the next river and the next river. But it was not happening where the farms are still sitting. And so I quietly collected all of DFO's numbers and I put it together in a briefing and I took it to the First Nation chiefs. And I was like, look, go to the biologists, see if they know what happened other than fish farms. But it's not just that they removed the fish farms, it's that we do have that underlying science that said they got covered with sea lice. They were infected with this bacteria, Tenacibaculum, with a virus PRV, and on and on and on. Testing their immune system for a response. We know these things were hurting these fish. Well, this year, the prize salmon isn't the big Chinook for the First Nations of this coast and for the commercial fishermen of this coast. It's the sockeye salmon, the red salmon. And the Fraser River used to be the biggest wild salmon river in the world. And it's huge. And the fish come all the way down the coast of British Columbia. And then they go in through the streets of Vancouver, the city of Vancouver. And then they swim up this river and they practically go back up to Alaska. It's such a long river. And at the very end of that river is the Takla First Nation. And I went up there and talked to them. It takes days and days and days to drive up there. I talked to them years ago, I think it was 2009. They were so sad because they knew it was the end of their way of life, the end of catching these fish, the end of their taking care of these runs of fish that they had done for time immemorial. Well, this year, the parents, there was about 70,000. I know that sounds like a lot of fish, but for Fraser sockeye, that's getting so far down. They got back 750,000. That's 7 babies survived for every single male and female sockeye salmon that made it up to Tackle landing 4 years ago. And then we have what are called test sets. And so on the marine approaches to the Fraser River, the federal government puts fish boats out there and they have them fish exactly the same way in the same spots every single year. And using those numbers, they figure out whether they can open a commercial fishery or not. Well, the 28th of July, the 29th of July, the 30th of July, they were getting between 7,000 and 8,000 fish in the set. And nobody had seen that for July. This was higher than any numbers in the history of test setting. And then on July 31st, they got 15,000. And everybody's like, oh my God, we are off the map. What is going on? And suddenly, commercial fishermen, First Nations, sport fishermen are saying, it's the farms. So British Columbia is the only place where this experiment is running. Had the farms, we had them since the late 1980s. And they have not been, only half the farms are gone, but they are gone out of a stretch that is very important because juvenile salmon from a lot of rivers are no longer getting impacted by salmon farms. They're not exposed to them when they're little, which is the most dangerous moment in their life because, well, you know, children are more vulnerable than adults. It's just the way it is in the biological world. And we have places where there's still farms and they still have low returns. DFO is predicting accurately for areas that still have farms. They're like, yeah, you're not going to really get many fish back. That's what they told the people on Tackle Landing this year. Yeah, no, you're not going to get many fish back. So DFO doesn't know what is going on because they're not factoring in these salmon farms. And so for those of you fighting this industry on the East Coast, you know, there's a lot of things that you could do. And personally, I feel like I did virtually all of them. I did run for government and I didn't win though, Peter. So you're in uncharted territory. But I would really watch what is going on here in British Columbia. And I'm not really concerned. I'm not really sure if your concern is your Atlantic salmon declines or your lobster declines, which all are related to farms, have direct links to farming, but I'm not really sure, that a removal will see a rebound of lobster. I'm not sure how that works because I don't understand it, but I would stay on this because if this works, you can say to government, they're planning to put the farms back. The fish farming industry thinks they're going to put the fish farms back in 2029. But the question here is, do we really want to risk everything we've seen over these last few years to put this industry back? And I think that the East Coast, if it works on the West Coast, you should ask for the same treatment and the same opportunities. Because, I mean, the fish farmers are slandering me more than usual. They've actually been quiet for the last few years, but this is clearly a sensitive point for them, that these fish are just, it's almost like a coiled spring effect. When you release this pressure, I mean, it'd be so interesting to see what happened in Norway. If you release this pressure, they don't just come back to normal levels, they just go boing. We don't know how that's going to play out. Climate change is still happening. All kinds of bad things are still happening. And yet the fish did this as soon as these filthy, aggressive, litigious companies had to get out. But it was driven by First Nations and another group that were incredibly important, didn't want to be seen with me, was the ultra wealthy of British Columbia who loved to fish. And they got involved and they had their own private meetings with government. And I know they have an impact because they pay for these people's campaigns. So First Nations and the ultra wealthy were incredibly important to this. But please use the evidence that is happening here. Watch what is going on and don't pretend that Eastern Canada doesn't deserve what has been hard won here. So thanks.
Thank you, Alexandra. And I think that's actually a very good point to leave to finish on. That's no, I can assure you as well that Healthy Bays are not assuming that how can I put it, with the poor relations for
Yeah,
the,
good.
we will be doing everything we can. But yes, fantastic overview and some great data coming out of there. So we've got time for one or two questions. So we've got the panel up at the moment. I've got them here. So this will probably take up all the remaining time with just this one question, but going round our presenters, what can you offer Nova Scotians as one piece of advice? And what would that advice be? So how about Peter? Because I think you have to go fairly soon, don't you? Oh, Peter's muted. If we can unmute him, hang on. No, Peter's still
There
muted.
There we go. Okay, one piece of advice: go hard.
Okay.
There are far too many people who want to sort of go into consultations and take it easy and not offend anyone. Just go bloody hard.
Great.
Thank you, and Alex, I think you're bloody amazing. Thank you.
Likewise, Peter.
Well, we're going to have another of these meetings.
You're a cliffhanger.
All the best, Peter. Good luck.
Thank you. I have to go parliamentary duties. My apologies.
Okay. I'll next pick on Rune because it's way past his bedtime in Norway. So what would your number one thing be, Rune?
Well, what happened now?
Yeah, you're good. I can hear you.
I'm good. Okay, thank you. Well, it is that we have to take lessons from all the factors that are affecting our nature when it comes to the salmon farm industry and actually fish farm industry. I would really advise everyone to kind of read up on science and kind of transfer that science into understandable language to the public, because that is what we're actually missing here, is that the science is kind of hard to understand for the public and the voters and the politicians. Make it easy to understand, but before you can kind of understand it and own it in your heart, you need to kind of read up on it so you can kind of not own the information in your heart when you start speaking. So that's my advice.
Excellent. I like your data, your stuff on the microplastics, because I can see a thing there saying, you know, order salmon. Would you like microplastics with that? You know,
Well, there's a lot of microplastic in the salmon fillet as well.
yeah. That's what I
And
mean, yeah.
remember one thing, that the numbers that is being presented is like the bare minimum. We don't know how much microplastic is kind of emitted, but I mean, that's the bare minimum. 1 kilo of microplastic per week per employee. That's quite a lot.
Yeah, huge amount. Catalina, have you got a single
you.
thing? You've probably got hundreds of things you could tell us. Go pick one.
No, but yeah. But what I was thinking while you were talking is that what we can see at the GSFR, and I think that it was also clear today with what Rune told us, Peter told us, and Alex was telling us, hey, that didn't work here, it worked something else, or it's working, or at least we can try. So my only advice would be, well, the same as Peter, to go fiercely, but at the same time, try different things, try what's the thing that's more important in your community. I know for us it was the economical issue and the jobs. That's usually what's more important for our legislators and our policymakers. But then if you have the opportunity to do what Alex did and to show people what was actually going on and take the farms, then do it. If you have the opportunity to run as candidates and get elected as Peter did, then do it. Like I think my advice would be to try different things and to reach out to as many people as you can from the GSFR or elsewhere to get the more experiences that you can get.
Lovely, thank you. Alexandra has pretty much told us what the number one thing is. If she'd like to,
I would just, yeah, I would just say, try to figure out who's got their hand on the lever.
Yeah.
Because I did so many things, and I was just like running at myself ragged, just trying to do everything. But I didn't think about who's got their hand on the lever. And that's where the First Nations came in, because in Canada, they are a federal government and they were able to affect that. But Norway, Rune, you definitely have the toughest case. But if you could look to British Columbia and say, hey, look what happened in British Columbia. Now they're going to say Morton is blah, 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 and it's blah, blah, blah. But nobody can figure out how these fish came back. They're like, oh, it's because we didn't fish in COVID. Oh, it's because of El Nino. Oh, it's because there was a volcano. Oh, blah, 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 blah. But that's not going to work every single year for only the areas where these fish came back. The fish are talking.
Yeah.
Send some people over, Rune, you know, but yeah.
If I may just add to what you're saying, Alexandra, there's not one serious scientist in Norway that think that you are blah, blah, blah. Make sure that you understand that.
But they don't have their hand on the lever.
Exactly. Exactly.
Problem. It's corrupt. This whole thing is corrupt. I saw an article in Norway. It said they are the mafia. Yeah, they put their people everywhere. So
exactly. I talked with Eva Jolie. No, not Eva Jolie. Well, the French judge that used to hunt for corruption, and she said some wisdom words to me and she said that if anyone say that there's no corruption in Norway, they're probably corrupt themselves. And corruption is everywhere. The only thing is that the corruption takes so many faces and facets that it's kind of hard to discover from time to time.
There's a documentary on Netflix called Billionaire Island, and it's basically about Maui.
Yeah, I know. It's a comedy, really, but it really takes the bull by the horns.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, finally go to our own Wendy. What would your one thing be, Wendy? You're on mute. Okay.
Yeah, thanks to everyone. All of you are heroes to all of us, and we are trying everything possible and trying to make connections in the local community, because it's really the people in the local communities who know their area, know what's important to people, know how to speak to people. So that's what we have been doing with this campaign, is trying to get out to the local communities where these leases are. In answer to Alexandra, for sure, like we have, the politicians in Nova Scotia used to say we don't have any more wild salmon. Well, we do have some wild recovering salmon in our rivers, but for us, it's very, I took note of what Rune was saying, because basically this industry destroys the marine environment and the ecology. And so for us, lobster and shellfish are primary. There's what keep our coastal communities alive and going. And so we can't have that marine environment. Our province is surrounded by ocean. We can't have that marine environment destroyed. It's our lifeline, it's our lifeblood, and it's our connection to the ocean here. And we'll try everything. Thank you very much.
Maybe we need to grow horns.
Yes. I noticed that behind you. Okay, I'm looking to Renee. I think we're running over quite a bit at the moment, so it's probably a good time to wrap up. I'd really like to thank you for taking part. It's been fantastic listening to everybody and everybody's different approach. It's also been really interesting seeing how we sort of eventually get to the same sort of solution, which is, let's say, finding the levers of power and then being as tough as we can. And it just takes a while to get there, I think. And that's that. And there's setbacks which you have to overcome. And I think we have to be grateful that we've got Catalina's group, which helps bring us all together, because as I say, together we're strong, and we're fighting a multinational, multi-billion-dollar organizations. And I think the success that we've had shows that not only A, we're right, but B, there's strength in our numbers. And I think, some days we feel like we're slipping back, but I think overall, I think we can win. And on that note, thank you all again, and maybe see you all again on another teleconference. So, good night.
Good night, all.
And goodbye.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having us.
Stay strong.
Will do. Might get some horns, Rune. That's what I
Yeah,
need.
get some horns.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good job, Richard.